What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host of bio bullet points in the show notes. This is intended for more of the regular listeners. You're certainly welcome to listen to this if this is your first time, but for people that have followed for quite a while, first of all, thank you. I'm very humbled and very blessed you listen. I'm blessed to be able to serve you. But it often seems like I am down on a lot of the things that the gun industry is doing. And I kind of am. So instead of just, ragging on, different things that I think are a bit ridiculous, how about trends that I would like to see in the gun industry? How about that? Let's talk about that. Trends that I would like to see. This may shock you, but I'm going to talk good about Glock for a minute. And not actually Glock's the product, but Glock the company. They do the GSSF, Glock Shooting Sports Foundation. If you've ever gone and shot one of those matches, competed in one of those are fantastic. I tell people, if you're going to shoot a Glock, if you're going to get into competition, those are one of the best, easy, low barrier to entry competitions to get into. They're meant for getting new shooters that shoot Glocks into competition. I applaud Glock for that. I know. I just gave Glock a compliment. And that's amazing that they do that. I've competed in them. I've won Glocks in them. I applaud them for doing that. They give Glocks away for good shooters. They also give Glocks away just, I think one per match, just a random drawing if you show up. That's fantastic. Why is Glock the only company doing that? Their match is good, and it's challenging if you're a good shooter, and it's easy enough that you don't feel intimidated to do it, other than you're just going to be nervous if it's your first competition. If you're a new shooter, why aren't more companies doing this? Either as a single company or a collaboration. Did you know that there is a Pittman-Robertson tax on all guns and ammunition? And I love hunting, and I'm a big-time hunter, but the majority of ammunition sold in the U.S. is not to hunters. It's to shooters, like competition shooters, recreational shooters, just plinking, having fun. 11% of that in the Pittman-Robertson tax. And that can go to shooting ranges and shooting places. A big problem with today's modern suburban, urban culture is places to shoot. I would love to see a trend in the Pittman-Robertson and gun companies getting together. If they want to make money, have them shoot more. And it'll help everybody. You'll have better shooters. You'll have people spending money on things that matter, getting better. You'll have people competing mano a mano, or just against themselves and trying to beat their previous week's month's score. Like, why isn't Winchester getting with Pittman-Robertson and saying, let's go to, a bunch of these areas in the U.S. where it's hard to shoot, and let's use some of that money, a lot of these big urban areas that are just run down and a lot of places that are gone in disrepair, and make a shooting range, a place where people can shoot close to where they live so they can actually shoot often instead of having to make, a long trip. I remember when I didn't have to. I remember when I lived in Florida for a little while so that we could spend some time with my wife's family. What an abysmal freaking place to live as a shooter, like Central Florida. You have to drive to a range where you have to literally have to shoot off a bench. If your gun's already zero, why are you shooting off a bench? But they could there's plenty of places where they could, use that 11% tax and buy land and have a decent place for people to shoot with actual bays where you can actually do like moving and shooting and dynamic shooting and things like that. Why aren't we using and encouraging that, right? Why isn't there more of those kind of places and leagues? You could have let's say Winchester and Browning. I think they're the same parent company. Why doesn't Winchester and Browning have their own practical hunting competition? And I'm not talking about ELR. I'm not talking about N.R.A. I'm talking about like practical hunting, shooting from standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, maybe out of a mock tree stand, kind of like you would do practical pistol, but practical hunting with their practical hunting rifles, like kind of like Glock does, where it's, their basic, Winchester Model 70 or XPRs with no modifications, with a 3-9 scope, or, whatever the rules are going to be, and you shoot. Not only would it make men better hunters and better providers for their family, it would help them sell product. And instead of trying to convince somebody to buy a new gun in the new Gucci caliber, which they probably would still do, you could actually get them shooting a bunch of your guns and ammo. I would like to see more of that. Bring back revolver competitions, right? Bring back PPC, bring back, for some reason people are still in love with the revolvers. And I get it for like J-frames and pocket guns and stuff, but like people are buying like full-size revolvers, which is great if you want to do that. Why don't, Ruger, Winchester, Ruger, Colt, and Smith & Wesson, why don't they have like a collaboration of getting together, Pittman Robertson, building ranges and having a legit shooting league? You're going to have the guys like you did in days of yore, like, the Colt Python is better. And guys are like, no, the Smith & Wesson Model 69 is better. You could have that. You could have that with even more modern concepts. You could do some slow fire bullseye, or you could have it a completely different competition. You could have practical defensive carry revolver competitions. I know there's I-Core, but I'm talking about getting it in a lot of different places where people actually shoot. That is something I would like to see. I would like to see rifle teams at high schools again. Call me crazy. I think we need more guns in school, not less. I had a rifle team when I was in school. The schools around me had rifle teams. One of the places I cut my teeth growing up in being a good marksman. I was blessed to win my first gold medal before I joined the Marine Corps. But get the youth into shooting. Have the Pittman Robertson and these gun companies partnering on that. And if they're always coming out with these commemorative guns. How about building a special run of guns like the Ruger 1022? We're going to have a whole 1022 competition because most, that's a very easy gun, and a lot of young shooters are going to have that, and it's low barrier to entry. Just have a division where it's a stock 1022, stainless blue, doesn't matter, but a factory 1022 with a factory trigger and factory sights. Of course, you're going to have a modified division where they can run their Gucci guns or whatever, but just stock 1022s with stock triggers, which aren't that great, and stock sights, which are serviceable. But everybody's competing on the same field. Why doesn't, Ruger have a league like that for kids, schools around the nation? That's the major thing that I would like to see. I would like to see a return to American gun culture where men competed against each other and shooting was a big sport. You got guys buying revolvers. Have them be good at carrying and getting hits on target with a revolver. And I'm not talking about going to an indoor range and putting a giant silhouette up at 3 yards and being like, oh, I hit the target once, I'm good to go. There's so much more than that. There are a bunch of different ideas you could do like that. But I think at least at first, a lot of it's going to have to be, beginner friendly. And more places to shoot in more urban and suburban areas. I would love, this is not going to happen, but I would love to live in America where half the fast food places just went away and they became places to shoot. We've become a nation of people that just buy guns and put them in a safe or shoot them once or twice. And that's fine if you're a gun collector, but let's get back to, men that knew how to shoot, that learned how to shoot, that grew up shooting. Let's get into some other trends I would like to see. Of course, that's the big one. I wasn't around for it, but I believe the older gun manufacturers back in the day, like Winchester or Colt, so you could custom order stuff from the factory. And I know some factories have custom shops, but I would really like to see this come back where they'd have like a base action. And of course, they're going to have prefab models. They always have. Like, this is your basic. But there's obviously a market for it because there's a bunch of small boutique companies that do this and charge really high-end money for these guns, where you're taking a basic bolt action and basically you're just, they're basically bedding it or putting pillar bedding in the stock, maybe putting a carbon fiber barrel on it and charge you, $2,000 to $4,000. I would think that, Winchester, Savage, they could do something like this, and they do make a bunch of different models, but that's not what I'm talking about. Where let's take a Winchester. I want a Winchester featherweight. I want it in stainless steel. I want it with a 12 3/4 length of pull. Getting back to the first part of this, you shoot enough, you know what length of pull that you like. I want it with this length of pull. I want a recessed target crown of 11 degrees. I'm getting it with a stainless barrel, so I like the look of a blonde maple stock. I want your old school Model 70 iron sights on it. And I want it in 6.5x55 Swede. That's just an example. You guys listen for any length of time. I love a Ruger Scout rifle. I was out chasing deer and elk around yesterday with one. But if I could get a hold of Ruger and be like, I would like you to custom make me, instead of the 16-inch barrel, I would like a 19-inch barrel. Just install an aftermarket Timney trigger. I'll pay the extra. The Scout rail they have on there, I like it. I like the idea of it. I like that I can have iron sights and a scope mounted on there, but I know generally my eye relief and which ones I use. So can you take that rail off, grind it down, machine it down so that the T1 and the T2 and 3 are there, and then whatever it would be, the T7, 8, and 9 are there, and all the rest of the slots and the pick rail is gone, ground down. So it's just the monolithic piece without all the stuff to save weight, to save the aggressiveness of those teeth on there. I like the synthetic stock that you guys are running. Why don't you hydro dip it for me in Rhodesian Ridgeback, or in Rhodesian brushstroke camo, because I have Rhodesian Ridgebacks. That will be cool. Why not? Certainly none of those things should be a big deal. You would pay for it. And the Ruger American Gen 2 is a good rifle, but I'd like to have a little bit more customization than do I want it with a, bronze Cerakote, a silver Cerakote, or a black Cerakote, and a green stock or a brown stock or a gray stock. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with those base models, but I'd rather be able to, call them up and say, hey, I want one with iron sights. And it's primarily a hunting gun, so instead of the detachable magazine for this, can I have a hinged floor plate magazine? For the type of hunting I do, that's what I want. It seems like something they could do. Again, if they were set up for like factory custom orders. One thing I think I've mentioned before in the ammo, they come out with new ammo all the time, a bunch of different loads. Here's what I would like to see from major manufacturers. Oftentimes, when you get a new rifle, you need to know what the rifle likes. People are like, what load should I shoot out of this gun? Well, I don't know. You should try a bunch and figure out which load the gun likes. I could have, for instance, that Ruger Scout rifle that mine loves the Federal Power Shock. Cheap, affordable, good hunting load. Yours may not like that. So if I tell you that doesn't mean anything to you. Yours may like Winchester X-Point. That's fine. This will probably be within a manufacturer, but why wouldn't you have, let's take one I haven't used yet, Nosler, and have Nosler come out with a box of ammunition with 4 rounds or 5 rounds, however they want to do it. They come in 20 rounds of boxes, so it would be divisible by 4 or 5, whatever. Right, and have several different loads. You could have your Nosler Whitetail, you could have your Nosler Accubond, you could have your Nosler Partition. You could have 4 or 5 rounds of each. Why would you want to do this? So somebody could buy that, call it Assortment A, Menu A, like they do with MREs, right? and it's got several different loads of that. So you could buy that box and then figure out what your gun likes. And you're like, oh, you know what? My 308 likes 150 grain nozzler partitions. Then you can get an entire box or an entire case, if you shoot a lot, of that factory ammunition. Seems like a manufacturer would encourage that. And I think they would make a decent amount of money on that, because they probably have, menu A, menu B, menu C, where, they do that with 150, 165, 180 grain, for sticking with whatever caliber I said, 308. You'd still be buying 3 boxes of ammo, but you get to try a bunch of different loads. And then likely if you have one 308, you may have another. So you can try and figure out which load that your gun likes without having to buy a box of 20, and then you shoot 3 and you go, oh, my gun doesn't like this load. Now I'm stuck with 17 rounds that my gun doesn't like. I did a poll on, and this is not really on the gun industry. A lot of this is done by fish and game agencies and things like that. But I have to believe that some companies have some pull with certain things. I don't know. But it'd be a trend in the gun industry either way. I would like to see some more common sense and different hunting seasons. Riddle me this. How is it in some states you can hunt with an AR-15, and I'm all for being able to hunt with whatever you want, but they have certain seasons where you can hunt with an AR-15 and a 350 Legend, but you can't hunt with an old, literally, 100-year-old Winchester 94 and a 30-30 in the same season? If your argument is there's too many people, that may be an indicator of where you live, but let's get off of that. They say we want shorter range cartridges. Okay, well, you should know that manufacturers are just going to work around those laws. Why don't you just base it on something like a 30-30, 150 grain and say this amount of power and drop or less? Totally hunt under these laws. You could totally hunt with a 360 buck hammer, but you can't hunt with a 35 Remington and a 336 Marlin. Okay, but getting off of that, ones that I would like to see, more handgun seasons. I'm blessed. The state that I live in has a short range weapon season for certain tags, but a lot of Americans are into handgun shooting. If you want more Americans hunting, and as much as I complain about seeing hunters all the time when I'm out in the woods and people come from all over the world to hunt where I'm at, we need hunters. It's kind of like carrying a gun or buying guns, having a carry permit. If nobody does it, it's way easier to take away. Hunting, we need hunters. Do you think if people just gave up hunting that we would still, you were the only guy that would continue to hunt? You need hunters. And I would submit, as much as you may not like seeing that orange hat when you're getting to your favorite hunting spot, you want hunters if you think about it big picture. If you take it out of the micro and look at the macro, you want hunters. A lot of Americans are more into handgun shooting nowadays. I love handgun shooting. I love it because it's hard. If you want shorter range weapons, have a handgun season. And yes, you can do unethical things with a handgun, but you can do unethical things with a bow. You can injure deer with a bow. There are several countries that don't allow archery hunting because they think it's unethical. But the ethics and efficacy lie in the hunter. The hunter should know that's a good shot or a bad shot. I'll give you an example. I was hunting yesterday. I saw a bunch of elk. I just saw them going through a gap in the trees on the next mountain, and I thought, I need to get into a position where I can see where they're going so I can cut that distance and ambush them. Get up there, still hunt them, ambush them. Even without snow, a big herd of elk like that makes a pretty good amount of track. I thought, I'm going to get into a position. Well, I hadn't seen any deer all morning, and as soon as I rush to get into a position where I can keep glassing these elk to see where they're going, boom, an entire herd of mule deer erupts from underneath me. And I had both a mule deer tag and an elk tag for the zone I was hunting in. Both were valid. Could have shot either one. I got no problem shooting a deer on the move. I got no problem shooting a deer at 150-ish yards, which is about what this nice buck was. But he was running through timber at 150 yards. And I didn't have the most stable of footing because I was speedily going downhill. And by the time I got up to get a shot, I didn't think it was an ethical shot, so I didn't take it. Even though on paper, 150-yard shot with a 308, perfectly fine. But I didn't have the shot, or I didn't think with a reasonable degree of certainty I could have made an ethical shot on that animal. Even though I could have shot him with a much smaller caliber, or I could have shot him much farther away. But just in that situation, the ethics and the efficacy doesn't lie in the platform. It lies in the hunter. The hunter has to know when to not pull the trigger. That's the mark of a good hunter. Instead of just lobbing rounds out there and be like, oh, I hope I connect with something. You have a reasonable expectation that you're going to sink that shot where it needs to go. That said, I think handgun seasons would be great. I have been blessed to take a lot of big game with handguns. I've taken many of them in regular circumstances without a special season. But I do that because of the challenge, because it's hard. A lot more people would be apt to do it if there was a special season. And not so much out west where I am here, but on the East Coast, there is an overabundance of deer. There are so many deer that are dying of communicable diseases at a large rate. There's a ton of ticks. There's a ton of other diseases. We make a lot of really good habitat for whitetail. I've heard several sources that we have more whitetail now than when Columbus landed. So I don't think the argument isn't you're going to take too many deer. Have a little bit of a special season for handgun hunters. I love archery too, and I love archery hunting as well. But a lot more Americans have handguns and shoot handguns, and I think would shoot handguns and are going to get into archery. So if you want more hunters, a handgun season will be good. I would like to see more states with handgun seasons. And I mean actual handguns. I'm not talking about like a braced AR. I'm talking about an actual handgun. You got all these guys buying revolvers. Give them something practical to do with a revolver. That's one of the places where a revolver makes sense. A good medium to large revolver in common calibers is a decent hunting round if you're a decent shot and an ethical hunter. The power is there. It's the ability to get hits on target that's much harder than a rifle. But a handgun season, I think that would be fantastic. Why aren't Colt and Smith & Wesson and Ruger lobbying for handgun seasons if you're worried about dense populations and, shorter range guns? And just for fun, why don't we have a nostalgia season? Maybe at the end of the season, a couple extra days in places where there's more deer. Why don't we have a nostalgia hunt just for fun? Like stuff that was around for hunting, not for safety. Like if you think you might get lost, you need a GPS, that's fine. But like for taking the animal, let's say 1906 tech and back. So cartridges that were around in 1906, like the 30-06, the 30-30, the 7 Mauser, iron sights, no camo. Your camo is plaid. In states that require orange for this season, just get rid of the orange and make it a red plaid flannel shirt or a red plaid shirt. I actually don't like cotton. I just think that will be a cool thing to do that I hope people would be interested in. Get your old Jones hat, your old LL Bean boots, some wool pants, a plaid shirt, and then maybe people realize that you don't need all the high-tech gear to kill stuff. You just need to get out there and get it done. Plus, it would get people out in the woods, I think, with some of the older guns that are largely sitting in safes now because everybody thinks they need the latest and greatest stuff. Which, if you want that, that's great. But that old, bolt action 30-06 will still take game. That old lever action 30-30 with iron sights. It'll still take stuff. Hey, it would even give people a reason to get out there with these lever action 4570s they've been buying. Anyway, those are some trends that I would like to see. This is just me talking because I think I often am like, oh, great, another one of these. Just what we need. Another Instagram flex gun or another Instagram flex accessory. I don't even have Instagram. But it seems like a lot of gun culture is going that way. But here's some things that I would like to see. Maybe you'd like to see them too. Anyway, with that, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Your tactical tip of the day. You shall not steal. Your tactical verse of the day. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.